he might have had the same things occur in his life, no doubt. And my phone is upstairs, so I'm not going to go bother to get that now. It's too late. Alright, so if I paste that in, there we go. Alright, so, hi, I'm Dave, and there's no Mickey, and we are Platos Cave, and good morning to you, 7 a.m, well, 7:15 now. And we're coming to you from Australia for Revolution Radio on revolution.radio, where it's home to fresh, unfiltered ideas and conversations you find in the chat room where I am now. And it's a great place to get your merch. This is a show number XXX. I don't know what show number this is. I think we lost count a long time ago, and we've never bothered to catch up with that. You can catch us online on air, and we can catch us on it using a smart device. Using an app, or you can just sit at home and listen on a Grace Tabletop Digital Radio. It's free to access the archives, so do try and catch someone else's show. If you do that, you might find something else you like, and you can tell someone about it. I'm broadcasting out of Dark and John Country, and we respect the elders for all of the areas across Australia and the Torres Strait Islands, for that matter. And Tasmania. Oh, wow. Alright, so there was a couple of stories that I did want to bring up. Hang on a minute, let me have a look. Let me see. Yeah, now I can't talk too much about this because of YouTube censorship. I really apologise that I'm not a doctor. I'm only talking about a news story, and I'll attempt to find the news story and see if it exists so I can actually read it out. Yeah. So it's not the story that I would prefer to read, but it comes from a university. This one's different. This isn't the one that's been quoted in the other story, but there is what appears to be more stories coming out about the medical interventions we've had over the last few years, and that excess deaths are occurring, and that those excess deaths that are occurring are correlatively associated possibly with those medical interventions. And it's a shame. I'm not going to go too deep in it, because all that'll happen then is that we'll get this show deleted. That's all that's going to happen. So not going to bother. Let me see. There was something else that I wanted to mention. I know we had 3 CMEs all joined together, but now we've got this heat wave that's just come out of the blue. We haven't in Australia, right? In the eastern seaboard, about less than halfway up the coastline, we've suddenly had what we would normally call, the real summer, because 20s and 26 degrees Celsius is lovely. That's the average long-term temperature for summer, going back, during recorded records. During recorded history, and we've now seen one of those jumps up to, it's nearly twice as hot. It's nearly 50 degrees, and it's going to be in the 40s. somewhere on the eastern coast all week, and we just had a warning for our area. It was very hot, very humid, and it just seems to make everything worse. So, yeah, it's been a challenging day. You know, the electrical grid. Good question. Electrical grid is going to be suffering because everyone's going to be running their air conditioners. And for those people without air conditioners, it's extremely tough to get through heat waves. A lot of cars struggle. Air conditioning units are only rated within a certain temperature range to be effective, and if the temperature that you're trying to solve with an air conditioner goes higher than a certain or outside of that range, the air conditioner is no longer effective. It's okay to heat things when something's frozen, but your heat pumps don't like to be in sub-zero, which is one. You've got to kind of protect them from the environment to a certain extent. And when it's over 40, they really struggle. I'm sure there's a temperature rating on the device, which I should read, but I'm not going to say the brand, so it's irrelevant. In your car, the air conditioner has to do the same thing that your fridge does, and it's compressing a gas and then expanding the gas through a tube, and that differential between the compressed gas and the expanded gas, because you spray it through a small nozzle, and that's where the heat is lost. She cools it down, and that's a remarkable technology. I'm glad that it exists. I'm sure we can all adhere to that, but it is only effective in a certain range. So as long as the electricity doesn't fall over and we don't go into load sharing, where some people get electricity some of the time during a heat wave, then we should see us glide through it. But because the power production was sold off in Australia for the most part, and people had to borrow money, and it is, like I said, for the most part, either brand new solar panels, or it's coal-fired plants that the owners, who were the government prior, state government, I believe, they never, those cash cows, they never took any of the profit away into long-term maintenance planning. And so they were all running down with the hope that they could just turn them off. But because the runway to take off to be in total renewables is so long, this wasn't foreseen, I believe. I'm only making it up. It's a way of trying to explain what they did. I think they just vacuumed all the profit away. That's all they did. Then ended up going, oh wow, they're falling apart. We really should be doing some upgrades. And they turn around where there's no money there to do it because they've just been vacuuming all the profit away. So without a good, reasonable plan to upgrade and a fund to do it, they've just let them run into the ground. And you might have had a friend, or you might have done it yourself with a motor vehicle. Just run it into the ground. You stop servicing it. Everything that broke, you just left it in a broke state or a broken state, and kept going. That's it. Pioneer you. Whereas you could have maintained all of the broken parts back to fixed, all of the things that didn't work back to operational, and you could still be enjoying that lovely vehicle. But you don't. It's only the intrepid that do it at very high cost. In the end, just you wait too long and there's no more spares. And that's very much what happened to Australia's power production. And we don't have no nuclear. We're nuclear free as far as power production is concerned. We have some medical radiation pools, and that's the end of that. So it's a shame that we don't, because we'd be a much better place, with abundant amounts of power made cheaply. It'd be interesting. What an interesting world that would be if that were the case. But it isn't. And it's hideously expensive. Like, between my friends and I, we have 4-person families, and we're looking at something like $1,500 for our power production per house, consumption, and it's nuts. I don't know how regular people do it. I think they turn everything off. One of my friends has ducted air, and that's extremely rare in Australia. It costs a lot to run. You need different zones in the house where different zones will heat up during the day or be cold, and you need to counter that temperature variation within your zones, so that your zones are the cooling is dispersed appropriately throughout the zones of the house, keep everything stable. And that's really rare. It's an over expense, whereas having a separate unit for each of those zones, and you only run them if you need them, is much more effective, and you can set their zones to their appropriate temperature. And look, all of the effort is put into only those zones, and that's really good. So that's kind of what we do here. Although not all the houses are made for the heat. When we first got here, we built very deep verandas that are roofed, instead of small eave protruding from the edge of the building outward to perform a minor shadow across the vertical surfaces of the house, and that shadow preventing the house itself from heating up during the hottest part of the day. We get the hottest part of the day in late afternoon, so from midday, say 11 o'clock, all the way through to sunset, and it'll breach that little tiny eave. So people that came here first decided huge decks around the house, all with a single oversized roof to cater for those oversized decks, and surrounding deck goes right around the house, and the house is raised off the ground without electricity or air conditioning of any kind. The flow of air under the house, which was cooler, would allow the house to not overheat. So you would open up all the windows anyway, and all the flow of air through the house prevented the build-up of humidity, and you got to be able to sweat and cool down and be shaded all at once. Really good idea. Today they don't build any eaves at all. The roof minimizes itself to the edge of the vertical plane of the house, and good luck with that. So, and everyone likes a lot more glass than they used to in the olden days, so you might have a whole wall of glass or something like that. It's quite something. Very hard to heat, very hard to cool down. And in Australia we don't even use double glazing or triple glazing, I've seen in some countries. We don't use treated glass that prevents UV light coming in. We just don't do any of that. It's expensive enough now in Australia to use any of those resources, let alone 3 times as much in a triple glazing. So since it isn't the normal practice, it's quite an unusual event to be in a house that has that treatment, because you immediately discover why you should have done it in the first place. Now this is not a show about architecture, but the plight of living in Australia during a heat wave, where it's the temperature that we can get to temperatures very similar to that of, was it Death Valley, one of America's hottest places, and we're coastal. We're not even in the desert where these temperatures are. I live I live at least, if I was to get to the nearest body of water that was tidal, it's a 5-minute drive. And that's it. So, that's ocean water, tidal. And it's, even so, we're going to be in the 40s on the weekend, mid to late 30s for the rest of the week. And today was pretty hot, but it was just the sign of what's coming. And obviously the thing you do during the night is take advantage of trying to cool down all those materials within the house that were made hot during the day. So you try to, everything's fly screened because you'd be carried away with mosquitoes. So you wear the least, flowy kind of cotton kind of things. You want to try and cover your skin up as much as possible because UVB and C are really bad. And Australia has the highest count of skin cancer in the world. And that's because the sun's stronger here for some reason. And that's to do with the tilt of the Earth, and that our summer, the Earth, the Earth's sun is closer because of our weird elliptical orbit than it is. It isn't by very much, but it's enough to cause a huge difference. So if you come here from the US and I've never been skin burnt, I've never had sunburn in my life, you'll get it 15 minutes in the sun, and it'll be sunburnt in summer, and that's without putting any I was going to say suntan lotion. Jeez, I'm old. That's without any UV protection on. There's a lotion you can put on a sunscreen, as we call it, and then it'll be 30 plus that you'll put on. You won't put like 8, something like that. I don't even think you can buy that anymore. It's like 50 plus or 30 plus or something, and you put that on. There's a really interesting video clip that was used to promote the use of sunscreen, and it was done by, I think, the Cancer Council of Australia or something. And there's a camera that's detecting UV light on the face of the person who's putting the sunscreen on, and showed how poorly you can apply it, or how well you can apply it. It was just astounding how you didn't think that you were doing a bad job, but you were. And it once again, it ran home that idea, the premise that you really should be applying it to yourself. Because oddly, the fairer the skin, obviously the worse it is for UV, because it penetrates deeper into the skin, and that's what the tanning of our skin does, is prevent it from going deeper. But it's just the right wavelength to penetrate just enough that if you have any scars on your arms, that they appear backlit in the presence of UV light. If you're in the shade and UV light is bouncing around, it'll still penetrate your skin enough to look like those scars are backlit. It's very interesting. I use that as one of my detectors to tell whether I'm in or being exposed to a lot of UV light. It doesn't happen under regular light. It's only UV light that penetrates further, deeper into the skin, that causes the effect. So for me, that's how I can tell, but obviously everyone else can tell by how hot it is or by the warnings you receive, because we also have those warnings through our meteorological department. I've got an app on my phone that tells me when the worst time to be exposed to sunlight is. It's something else. So that in the US, there was I went to school. Just if you don't know me, I'm Dave, and I went to school in Canyon High in Anaheim Hills off Imperial, and it was, I wore no sunscreen, and I was totally brown back then from the sun. But I could be exposed to the sun all day in Southern California, and I wouldn't get burnt. I never did get burnt. I just tanned up, and I thought I'd look great because that was the 80s, and that was what you were looking for. But I soon realized that the sun wasn't as strong in the UV in summer there as it was here. And then obviously over the years it's progressively gotten worse here in Australia, and that's part of the ozone hole. But there was a news story where there was a parent in the US who I think was attempting to apply or had the child ask for sunscreen, and the school failed in some way. And I can't remember the full story, except that the child ended up with second-degree sunburn and had to be admitted to hospital with huge blistering of their skin and everything. That's awful. But it reminded me of the difference. So, I had a girlfriend once that I took to the beach, and she had a blister about the size of my hand on her back that appeared during the session at the beach. And then they're really bad. You can dehydrate from those blisters. The blister was because of the sun exposure, because the burn she was receiving that she didn't feel, until it was too late. Then it was awful. And I really apologize. I still apologize wholeheartedly to her for exposing her like that, even though I didn't need any sunscreen or anything. Back then, I think this early 80s. And I smile proudly because that I didn't need it, and I'm ashamed that I put her in a position where she was injured by the sun. But that's what it took for me to see the difference. And it's extraordinary now that there's so many people who are in their 50s now getting skin cancer taken off their ears, their cheeks, their hands, their forearms and things like that are exposed a lot. And it damages the DNA. They ran an advertising campaign about it where the sun was like little arrows being shot at you, and you didn't get them all the time, and you were unlucky to get hit by one, but if you did, then that's going to be a location of where the skin cancer grows. It wasn't something I ever thought about. And when I started looking into it, I couldn't believe that humans had lived so darn long then without our sunscreen and without dying of cancer. Because if you were just roaming about outside without any protection whatsoever, you'd imagine that very few of us would have got to the right age to produce children or offspring for ourselves as a society if the sun was that bad the whole time. I don't think it was. I think it's gotten significantly worse. I think that there's certainly an informational cover-up where they're not being, forthcoming about the dangers of the sun. I think that as they're finding their way through the quagmire of legal representation of the future, that will have to try to explain to us at one point why they were delinquent in their advice. In Australia, certainly they're on top of that. It's compulsory to have a hat to go to school here. And there is a no hat, no play. So you can't go outside without the hat on. And that hat is not specifically a wide brim hat, but it also has neck protection and it's broad brimmed, so it's going to protect your whole face, your ears, and the opening in which your head protrudes from your clothing to protect your neck. And that's really important, and I can't stress that enough, that it is very important for that to be the case, right? But when I discovered when I first was made notice that this was the case, was in the 2000s, when the government at the time was reporting on the ozone hole. That's what it's called. It's a lessening of the thickness of our atmosphere, our protective atmosphere, where the ozone chemical, the molecule, is consumed by a number of different things. And one was the CFC, the fluorocarbons. So the propellants in, say, like hairspray and all of the propellant bottles that we used to use. So you can use compressed air, we didn't know. But the other one, CFC, so, well, you know, they're cheap, so we'll use those. And the ozone is consumed by the chlorine in breakdown. So UV and ozone and the fluorocarbons have a chemical reaction, and it continues to run rampant by breaking free one of the carbon atoms and moving on and breaking free another carbon atom and the oxygen atom, and it keeps breaking them free and then moving on and doing it again. It causes a cleavage point and it takes them off in a unique way to those chemicals. Now, it wasn't just that the fluorocarbons were doing it, but there's gases from volcanoes that also do it. So if we had some crazy mad eruptions continuously around the world, in appropriate places you could have no ozone at all, as those chemicals created these chemical reactions and deleted the ozone. Ozone is really important. You do need it. It does protect us from, the UV light, UVB and C. UVA is okay. Small exposure to B apparently is good, but C is really bad. Anything above visible light, which includes all UV light, is dangerous to humans. Every other frequency above that in the EM spectrum is dangerous. And it's all ionizing wavelengths. And it's extraordinary. So if you think about this, right, how could we have lived on this planet amidst all this danger? And how could we have evolved to live here if it was always the case where this was dangerous? Yeah, it can be hot, but hot doesn't mean UV. Hot's infrared. That's lower than visible light. So take that away and have a think about what you might think is the ramifications of knowing what you know now. Do you consider, it's a good question to ask yourself, do you consider what I've been talking about to be a possibility or just completely useless? Happy to have comments in the bottom of the video, like, share and subscribe, and do tell people about this show. And good morning to you in the US. I'm getting to 7:45 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. And I'm Dave, and there's no Mecky tonight for some reason. It's really weird. I'll check my phone after the show. I'm sure he's fine. So, but anyway, yeah. So it made me think, were humans placed here from somewhere else? But when you read the Anunnakis, the stories, that Sumerian tales about the Anunnaki, where the Sumerians were told at one point to transcribe what we're telling you for record before they left. And they made us. We weren't the first they made. They made the Gigi to look after themselves, and they made the first kind of human, according to the text, which was, you could call it immortal, that's live forever. Why make too many of them? But we still bred anyway, and got a bit out of control. We were a bit naughty, and then they made us the last time after the flood, taught us a whole bunch of really cool things, and then buggered off. But they gave us 120-year duration lifespan. Like, it's a maximum. It's not something everyone hits. Not everyone gets to 120 and then goes at the end. Not everyone does that. There's a lot of things in life that can take you before then. And I've certainly had my fair share of friends who have all passed with calamities of some kind, whether intentional or unintentional. And, disease is another one that can take you. Bit concerned about the rise of another virus coming into from China, right coming into the time equivalent to the COVID year, back in 2019 when they populated the rest of the planet. Because at the moment they're saying exactly the same. Oh, there's no problem. Oh, you said there was no problem last time. Are you going to change the story? Nope. I'm making a point. I'm not suggesting they were the sentiments of the conversation. They're not. No, I'm not articulating the exact story, but very similar storylines between 2019 and this year, 2023, leading into Christmas, with a virus that seems to be going out of control. In one country, it's spread to, I think, the Netherlands. It's in the US already. It's only one. It'll only be days away before someone in Australia gets, sets a flag off. Oh, it's here as well. And the government's still incapable of saying, at the drop of a hat, let's stop people coming here from that country, or coming here through other countries from that same country. That's what I'd be doing. I just say shut the border. If you're a resident, you can come home unless you're coming home through that country, and you can't. Or you know what I mean? I think you know what I mean. So I'd be shutting the country. That's what I'd be doing. But since I think we've signed the WHO treaty that allows the WHO when to advise us to shut down, so our government is no longer responsible for the shutting down part. We just get advised and we do what we're told. It's a very interesting position that we should put ourselves into. And I believe we did sign that. It was recently, like a month ago, 6 weeks ago. And what does that mean in the future, I wonder? It depends on who's paid the WHO to say, to which message is being echoed by their mouths, is whoever had enough money to contribute to them and pay them to say it in a way, not directly. Because I do believe that's the reason why the WHO ended up calling the virus COVID-19 rather than what had happened in the past, where the flu was named over the place of origin. So you still have to remember that. That's very important. Because one of the contributors was the country of origin. And they go, we don't want our country to be slandered like that. No, we're a lot healthier than that. Oh, are you? Oh, that's good news. Thank you very much for telling me that. So COVID-19, it is, yes. But COVID-19 was actually, oddly, the virus. Yes. So it wasn't. Hang on, I'm getting this wrong. I got it wrong again. So SARS-CoV-2 was the virus, and the disease is COVID-19. That's what it is. So everyone had got it so muddled up that they just ended up calling it COVID-19 to be done with it. And SARS-CoV-2 was kind of lost to time, because that's the actual virus name. And so the disease is COVID-19. They're the symptoms that you display when you've infected by SARS-CoV-2. I imagine that the next one that would come out, if it was a SARS virus, would be SARS-CoV-3, because it's a version number of it. But I really wonder, where have we signed ourselves up to recently? I know that the WEF we've signed up, most of the countries of the world have signed up, except for the BRICS countries. So any conflict you might see between countries will be amongst those of opposite teams between BRICS and the rest of the world. But there's some very unusual members of BRICS. South Africa was an unusual member from, in my view. India was another one. And I don't think Australia has joined the BRICS nations, because it would mean that we'd be trading outside of the US dollars with the country of origin's own currency, and that of being China. So that's why people signed up to it, because they were coerced into trading in that currency. I think it's Iran, North Korea, there's a whole bunch of others in there as well. I'm not going to lie. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, because it's eerily similar to just simply trading with the US dollar. And I think the competition for the global currency, physical or digital, doesn't matter, is now in full swing. We're watching it happen, and by watching it, observe the players and which team they've chosen. I believe India just does it because that's just what people are doing today. I'm not sure that India is entirely aligned with China, but certainly financially they're doing it for the benefits that you get with it. But I'm not sure that everyone else is in that group. I'm not excluding anyone. I'm not saying that everyone is like that. It makes me question it, that's all. And if there were to be, a global conflict, I presume that the countries that have signed up for BRICS versus the rest of the world will be the two-party group, ally groups. Because it appears as though it's splitting down that way, and it's natural. It's natural to form teams, but I just didn't think it was going to happen like that. I didn't think that the war would turn out to be indicated by those measurements or those mechanics. I didn't think that. Yeah, it's extraordinary. It's a weird world that we go into. It's certainly an odd time to be alive on the planet. I like the tech, but it's driven by electricity, and without electricity, we're no better than we were back in, I don't know, 1700s, 1800s, before electricity. But we don't have any of the infrastructure that we had then. We don't have large amounts of horses. We don't have the feed for that many. If you were thinking about, the distribution of fuel or energy that we currently use, we don't have any of that we've replaced with electricity. Still going. There's just none. A few police forces around the world will have horses. I know they still have some horses in Sydney that they'll clop and not trot. They'll clop around the streets of the inner city. Certainly where I used to live. Just extraordinary. It was lovely sound. Where the streets have been paved over the cobblestones, but you could still hear the horses in a house that was 200 years old. You hear these horses clopping about, and you knew it was the police. It was really nice. I actually really liked it, and I'm not shy to tell you that I did deliver mail in my summer holidays on horseback when I think I was about 8, in a very small country town up in New South Wales, but where the town casino outside of Lismore was the big town of this little tiny town, where I think it was only a pub and a post office, a general store. I think that's all there was in this town. And my uncle did he did the post, and he told me to do it, so I did. That was so cool. It's a memory I can't do it again. It was great to have the opportunity to be able to do it when I did. That's the kind of thing I think we have to look at after we had if in the future, after we were to have a loss of electricity, we would have to adapt back to this era. I don't think there's any making this work again for some time. Like, bringing electricity back isn't something that we're going to be able to immediately do. We'll have electricity in little pockets. People have solar and their own batteries and things like that. But there won't be any maintenance of it. There won't be any factories, no distribution. There won't be any fuel distributed anywhere. So if you had, a car, you'd have to be making your own, ethanol to be able to drive the car. You wouldn't be getting any distillate, right? But petroleum distillate. You wouldn't get that from anywhere. You'd have to make it yourself. So these are the crazy thoughts that go through my head on a regular basis, and opening up the pantry and seeing what I would miss, that I couldn't produce at home, and maybe the origin materials come from vastly different places which couldn't be grown here, for whatever reason. It's the wrong climate, or obviously it's the wrong time of year, and you can't get the fruit like you could if it's seasonal again. So it's something another adjustment we'd have to make. But I can't believe it's already 11:56. There's only 1 minute left or less. So I do thank you. I'm glad I picked up the station. I will have to investigate what happened to Mecca, and you'll hear that on Thursday at 7 o'clock in the morning, Eastern Time, when we start up our Platos Cave show then. In the meantime, stay safe. I don't know who's coming up next, but have a great day, and stay out of trouble.